This is the question that I have been dying to get an answer from
Yeah.
like a Nike
Yeah.
person, right? How much of what you are doing now and you want to do in the future, how much of that is going to be stuff that you learned and developed at Nike?
Yeah.
And how much of it is going to be stuff that you couldn't do at Nike that you wanted to do?
Yeah. That's a good question because it's a mix of both, to be totally honest.
Yeah.
Where the stuff that I've been doing for honestly the last 17 years of the brand was what I'm passionate about, right? Like I was either connecting with people through the brand or I was measuring the marketplace and trying to understand what those white space opportunities. That's always been my passion. And over time, you get to see lots of different scenarios of that. So you get to see how different sort of brands attack it or understand how to play in the space. And so you build experience there and some knowledge and background. But when you flip over to the other side, when you're part of these big brands, the hard part is you're very much constrained on what you can share externally. So we did a lot of the same kind of conversation is happening internally in the brand, but it never reaches the light of day because you are a representative of the brand. But now not being a representative of the brand and being separate, I'm able to share my own opinions.
Let's go.
And these are all my opinions and nobody else's. And it's great to have that opportunity to sort of have a voice and to talk to people like you and be able to expand what your influences and network is so that you are able to learn more and be able to share and riff off of different ideas together rather than just sort of being in the bubble or inside the berm, as we used to say.
Yeah. I mean, we've been a little rough on Nike in the last 29 episodes, but I think in a lot of cases, sort of deservedly so. But there hasn't been someone to kind of give that counterpoint to it. And I think, your background here is going to be really useful in terms of being able to really like shed some more light or a different angle on some of this stuff. And we won't just talk about Nike stuff, although there's plenty to talk about.
Yeah. But that could be its own separate podcast.
Yeah, honestly.
The deep dive.
The deep dive into like what's right and wrong at Nike Inc., right?
Yeah, totally.
But it's a good starting point to just like get the ball rolling is like, what is your background? Like, how did you get to Nike in the first place?
Yeah.
And then what? Like, how'd that unfold?
Yeah. So after college, I actually was an investment banker for 4 years. I know, not what you expected, right? And so it was interesting. In my third year of investment banking, I was at work on a Sunday night, and it's 8:00, and I get this call from my manager at the time, and he's like, "Hey, Steve, have you read the Wall Street Journal article on Sally Mae?" And I was like, "Hey, no, I haven't, but I'll check it out." And we talk a little bit more, and I hang up the phone, and he's like, and I'm thinking to myself, he's home alone with his kids at 8:00 at night, and he is super passionate about student loans. And I thought to myself, I'm like, I am not that passionate about student loans. I'm like, and so I did a little bit of self-reflection. Honestly, it didn't take much. And I was like, what do I love? And for me, engaging consumers in sports is really what I love. And if you can be through product or through brand, even better. And so I'm not necessarily a pro sport person. I don't necessarily follow the NFL to the nth degree. But I love taking somebody who isn't walking to walking or somebody who's walking to running. That to me is the empowering part of it. Yeah. And it played a really important role in my life in the background. And so I went to business school to sort of diversify my experience and then had the opportunity to come out to Nike 17 years ago. Wow. And so I started in strategy for women's training. Then I did strategy for all of our global brands at the time. And then from there, went into a marketing rotational program. So over 2.5 years, rotated through 6 different brand groups to gain experience in terms of what do each of the functions need? And as a brand manager, how do you brief them properly, right? Like how do you fill in those gaps? And so I had great experience. I was over in Central Eastern Europe for a while and representing them. I did retail brand, I did digital. And from there, I ended up going to be the director of marketing of brand for global sportswear, which was very cool. I kind of did retro running is sort of a big thing that I covered in women's, which was really fun.
Yeah.
And so that was a really like pivotal time for the brand in those spaces. And then from there, I was the brand director for North America DTC. So think of all of our stores that aren't factory within the US. So Nike Town, New York, Nike San Francisco, all of those. And we launched a bunch of doors and that was a great experience. And then I kind of had this another epiphany in my career that one of my next steps would have been to be in a territory, which is a city. Mm-hmm. And the city teams are really good on the marketing side of basically hosting parties. Like they do strategy and planning, but it's a lot of execution.
Yeah.
And my love is really the 30,000 foot level. It's sort of why I love business school. It's why I love strategy. And so at the same time, they were starting a group called Global Consumer Knowledge. And what they ended up doing is leveraging all of the data that we had and trying to bring that data to the rest of the organization to help impact business. So another way I would describe it is, how do you bring science to the art of what Nike was doing?
Yeah.
And so I was a decision scientist for 2 years. Then I was a quant researcher for 2 years. And then additional 3 years. And my last 3 years were in marketplace trends. So overseeing what the competitive landscape is, what are the opportunities for the brand, what are the challenges for the brand, and then how do we navigate that marketplace in the future. So it was in many ways a dream role. And so that's been great. And honestly, at the same time, the other cool thing that I've been doing is also teaching at the University of Oregon. So I teach a consumer research class to the sports product management program, which is a graduate program for students that want to be in the industry. And so that's been great. Yeah. And so I left Nike in February and now doing a bit of consulting and doing the teaching, which has been fun.
What was that first conversation like at Nike where you're like, hi, I'm an investment banker guy and I want to come work at this sporting company? I mean, especially, almost 17 years ago, what was that first entry point like?
So honestly, I interviewed in between my 2 years of business school to be an intern with the brand. And they, at the time, it was in strategy because that was the closest connection. And business school was a helpful sort of setup for all of that strategy side. But I didn't do terribly well, to be totally honest. And I ended up not getting the internship between my 2 years. And I ended up working for Oakley and I had a great experience there. But afterwards, I sort of reapplied, and I also don't think I did very well in my interviews the second time around. And I sort of was walking out and I'm like, you know what? I didn't nail it. Like, I don't think this is going to be me at the end of the day. But they were hosting a sort of a get together afterwards at a bar downtown. And I was going there and I was like, let's just go have a good time and talk to everybody. And I ended up talking to this woman named Emma Minto, who ran women's training strategy. And she told me, she's like, this is what I do. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. And she's like, oh, why? And I went into basically a 5-minute diatribe of women's training at the time and what are the challenges in a very male dominated world. And I think from there, it was like, oh, he has the passion. He sees the strategy. He sees the challenges and he has ideas on how he can actually navigate it. And so I use that with a lot of people that I talk to that are trying to get into the industry, is that share that knowledge in some ways. And social media was just starting at that time, but people have that opportunity to share it and have that voice. It can be really helpful.
That's amazing. Just like not going in the front door, but like kind of around the side a little bit, like
snuck in.
Imagine if you hadn't gone to that that after.
Exactly. And that's what I keep telling people is like, if they're a lot of the people that want to enter the industry kind of do just the basic things. So like I interviewed and that was what I need to do. And like, that's just the beginning. Like if there's any other opportunities to connect, take those opportunities because you never know what will happen or where will they lead you.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to have a thing at Red Bull where if I heard somebody's name or I met them kind of 3 different ways, I knew that they were like in the right circle that I needed to connect with. That was sort of my signal. If I just met somebody one time or saw them in one scenario, that was not enough. You had to get this like multiple kind of, different approaches to really understand somebody or really feel like this person's the right fit for what we're trying to do or whatever.
And that just shows the strength of the network, right? We are not a huge industry. Right. It seems big sometimes, but it's a lot smaller than you think it is. And so it is that relationship and who you know, and that can really help you through your career.
Well, I think we've done a solid job establishing that you're no slouch to have today's podcast happen. Obviously, on Fridays we do this sort of bro pod where Dylan and I just get together and riff on stuff. But obviously he's at UTMB and he's pumping out content like a maniac.
I mean, he's pumping out a lot of content. It's amazing to see him. I mean, Dylan, if you can hear us, I really want to see what's happening with the brands. You mentioned that in the last one, and maybe you're saving it for the next episode, but I do want to see what's happening over there, what's on people's feet.
Yeah. I mean, the output of 1 week. I mean, the other day he hit me up. He's like, okay, I have one piece of content about the top 10 storylines, and then I have 7 interviews. What do you think of the release strategy? And I was like, that's from one day?
Yeah.
Like, did you eat lunch? Like, what? You good? So yeah, he is definitely, and I wanted you to come in, and you and I had lunch a couple weeks back, and like I just didn't even want to get up from the table because we were like in such a fun conversation about all the different stuff.
It was really fun.
I just felt like, oh, this is like, if we're ever gonna have a moment where either Dylan or I can't make it, like, you should come in and hang out.
I'm happy to
with
hop
us.
in.
And
happy to jump in and talk about the industry. I love this stuff. So I could talk about it all day.
We've got like, gosh, how many pages? You put together an 8-page list. Come on, man.
What, you didn't read it all? With links to everything? There's a lot going on. And so I was on vacation 2 weeks ago with the family, and I was thinking about, hey, what are the stories? And there really weren't any stories. And then all of a sudden, literally the last 3 to 4 days, like the media has been on fire with different elements of what's happening. So it's a fun time to be on.
Where do you want to start? You want to talk about this Nike and StockX story that just came out?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So I don't know if people saw this, but StockX just came out with their current monthly report. And what's interesting, they had a 6-month report that came out that didn't really mention any brands like Nike. But this current report mentioned Nike very specifically, and that they are down 10% and Jordan's down 11% in terms of market share for them. And so I think this is a very interesting time, an interesting telling time about, one, how is the brand doing? It's another indicator for them. And then I will also add, Stiefel also came out with their brand check report. So they end up calling a number of retailers and asking them, all right, what are the hot brands? What do people want, et cetera? And they're seeing very similar numbers for Nike and Jordan. And I think, to me, it raises a couple questions. One, it's just, again, another indicator for what's happening with Nike. But two, the brands that are doing really well are Asics, New Balance, et cetera. And so there's this retro running that continues to sort of build and foster. And it poses a bunch of different questions to me of where are we in this whole process of hot shoes. And the first one is we're seeing a lot of strength of what was there in Air Force One, and I'm going to go back in time. There's always been this idea of a shoe of summer that's been really popular, and it goes all the way back to Free. If you think of Free to the 2000s, it went to Roshe, and then to Stan Smith, and then to Vans, and then to basically the Air Force One. Now, there's always been this ubiquitous shoe that people love, and it allows you to fit in and stand out at the same time, and it's a huge volume driver for these companies. So whoever is the company that has that shoe ends up doing very well, one from a sales perspective, but also from a brand perspective. And so to see sort of Nike falling off and Jordan falling off, and these other brands come up, it really, to me, indicates this idea of an inflection point within our industry to see what is the next style that's going to come in. Is it going to be the Samba? There's been a ton of conversation about it. Mm-hmm. Not seeing it on as many feet as much as I hear about it. And so is it that? Is it a triple white Hoka? Could that be the next shoe? But to me, that it more so than even what's happening with Nike, it just indicates that we are at an inflection point, and interested to see where it goes next, where the industry picks up, and what consumers resonates with consumers.
So really what you're saying is that, the Nike stuff is down, but there are other brands kind of filling that gap. So not looking like the resale market is necessarily down, but that there's a little bit of a shifting, like maybe everybody has enough Air Force Ones to take them through age 100 at this point, and they're mixing it up, right? They're diversifying their portfolio.
Yeah, and that is the idea. It's of a portfolio where brands oftentimes think of it as, hey, here's my current shoe, but this isn't going to be the hottest shoe forever. What are we going to put in after that shoe that's going to sort of bolster that? So could you take, let's say, Air Max and plug in Air Max after Air Force One and sort of then ride that opportunity? Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting challenge that everybody has, all these brands have at the moment, to compete and own that space.
So that's like a discussion that's happening internally of like, how do we make like the hot summer shoe?
Yes.
And is there, what are the levers that you can pull to put yourself in that conversation? Is it partnerships? Is it just the style of the product? Like, how do you get even positioned to have a hot summer shoe?
Yeah, it's a lot of conversations with a lot of different groups, but it sort of starts with what is the style that we think will resonate? What are we sort of hearing and seeing from consumers? And if we take the Samba as an example of an interesting way to sort of play it out, you can sort of see that energy building and growing, and it is generally a mid-priced product, which is good. It fits that criteria. It's a fairly ubiquitous shoe. It works well with jeans. It works well with shorts. It can be athletic and it can be dressed up. And so they see that it fits and it works. And now the question is, how do you manage that franchise? And to start, it's seeding it in the right places, making sure it's in things like fashion weeks, et cetera. It's on the right people. You can start with a little bit of that collab, that higher price point to sort of build that energy. And then once you build that energy, they find different ways to start to then move it into the marketplace at sort of more favorable prices and sort of create what's a niche into more mass. But the hard part is you got to manage not to go too far. And so do you offer it in Kohl's or do you offer it at sort of discount locations, which will then flood the market with the product, which will then quickly kill the brand? And I think you saw that with Vans. Vans had this really rapid rise. They did really well. And then basically there was so much product in the marketplace that they ended up sort of losing that trend and losing that uniqueness. Mm-hmm. And sort of people moved on. And so you have to sort of be very careful with how you do that.
Yeah.
And going forward. Yeah.
What do you do in that scenario? Like, what does Vans do in that case? Like, you've lost it, right?
Yeah.
You've overshot the landing, as it were. How do you pull back from that, or do you pull back from that?
Yeah. I think the one, you got to manage what you currently have. And so everybody talks about cleaning out the marketplace. I make sure that product is not as present as it was in the past. And you see, again, Adidas with Stan Smith did a sort of a good job cleaning out the marketplace. But then you've got to figure out what you're going to sort of plug in. And I think, New School is the shoe that they're sort of pushing. Mm-hmm. And how do you sort of replace that as the next one? And it's having that nice cadence. It does feel like for Vans, there was a bit of a gap between those, and that sort of left opportunity for people to move into Air Force One and so on. And so it moved off of it. So it's being diligent with that planning and almost being aggressive with that planning of pulling it out earlier than it should, and then plugging in something else.
So Nike and Jordan basically need to take a step back, let it just kind of settle, and put something else in where they can hopefully strike again, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good franchise management strategy.
Right on. Cool. This is good. This is so helpful to have sort of the behind the scenes on this kind of stuff, because we could always riff on it, but you've been in those meetings of like, how do we have the hot shoe for the summer, and what does that take?
Yeah.
And the thing that a lot of people don't really appreciate is how far back you start those conversations, because you're not having that conversation in May or June.
No. I mean, you've got most of these companies all have a 2-year go-to-market process. And so these conversations have been way in advance. Yeah. And the interesting part about that is you're running basically 8 seasons over at the same time. And so there's a lot of different conversations you have at different points. And so you're managing everything all at once, rather than just thinking about one season 2 years from now. You're managing several seasons all at the same time.
It's interesting to think about. Like, my mind immediately goes to Charlie XCX. Like, she had the album of the summer, right?
Yeah.
Brat, was like a big thing. The color of the album like was everywhere. And if you were working with her as one of your partners, that would definitely boost up your stakes in this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you think about even having the right partnerships in place where you would sort of spread out your risk, so you're not just tied into one key individual, but you have enough people that like maybe one of them actually hits, and then you can ride that a little bit too, where it's like maybe part of the strategy? Or do you think is it like too risky? I don't know.
No, I don't. I think it is, what you're describing to some degree is like a shotgun approach, is see what's out there. And I think that's a valid approach. Some brands, have the opportunity to play offense and defense. And I think the shotgun approach is a little bit of the defense. The offense is like, I'm going to pick one, I'm going to go deep in it. Let's see if I can ignite that. But you also have to be listening and be receptive to be able to hear what actually matters to consumers. And I think that's actually very much where Samba came from, is that it was a style, it was there and it was being seeded, but consumers grabbed onto it. And then once they grab onto it, it's you ride that wave and actively manage it.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's fun.
Where do you want to move next?
I think so actually our Under Armour conversation and the article from Retail Dive is actually a really good next connection point, because it talks about that idea of management over time.
Okay.
And so I sent over the article. I don't know if you had an opportunity.
Retail Dive.
Retail
right?
Dive.
Yep.
Yeah. And so the article is largely about, is centered around this idea of if Kevin Plank, who's the new CEO, he's come in.
The OG though as well.
OG.
Right.
And is he going to sort of help grow the company and move the company into this phase of transition and grow it? Or is it going to sort of hold it back from what it could be? And so I want to know from you. I don't think we need to necessarily have a conversation about, is Kevin Plank the right person? Because I'm not sure we know enough. But I am interested in your thoughts of what you think Under Armour should do. And as you think about it, I'm happy to give a little background on how Under Armour ended up here and give you a second to think about it.
Yeah, dude.
Okay,
cool.
And we can hopefully link this article in the show notes.
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely.
people can read.
All this stuff will be in the show notes. Man, I should almost
copy
paste in there.
And so the interesting thing about Under Armour is they sort of started around 1996, and they ended up creating base layers for team sports and started showing up in colleges and was a really hot brand to start, a real performance brand that was kind of under the radar of everybody else, because they didn't start in pro, they started in college. And so people were finding out about this through word of mouth, et cetera. And their strategy in terms of putting this all together is, we've talked about Blue Ocean a little bit, but it's a book about sort of jiving when everybody's headed in a different direction. And their approach was to look at Nike, and they said, all right, Nike, what is the challenge with Nike? And at the moment, or at that time, I should say, Nike was offering a lot of apparel in black and white, and they didn't necessarily have all the sizes in stock or all of the colors that they had in stock. And because managing apparel is really hard, so you don't have a ton of inventory. And so Under Armour took a very different approach, where they said, all right, I'm going to have a lot of different sizes, and I'm going to have it in a lot of different colors. And so they had a ton of inventory, and that was really successful because they had team colors, and everybody could buy those team colors, and it was readily available at the time. But as you imagine, the challenge with that is if product doesn't sell, you've got to find a way to discount it and sell it. And so they ended up expanding their outlet stores and then selling a lot of their products at discount. And so that created this hard part of authenticity, where what was once a premium product is now on sale, and the consumers had that expectation that it was going to be on sale. And sort of they lost that authenticity over time. And that being said, it still did well, especially in sort of the middle part of the country, as well as with hunters, interestingly. So they have a whole hunting line, and that really resonated. And it connected, honestly, with sort of older males and sort of more of that middle school aged male athlete. Right. But it was kind of missing that sweet spot of teen college and had that gap. And so it sort of found itself in this sort of challenging situation where it is now. And it is ripe for a change and to do something different. And so with that as a tee up, I'm interested in what you think they should do as a brand.
Well, it's that idea of what got you here won't get you there.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the tactics that you use in the early days on any project that you're working on will get you to a certain point, but to go the next step, you do have to change tack. You have to then go back, because at that point, people have probably copied you. People have figured out what you were doing that was working and have sort of blunted your ability to be successful there. So I think, I mean, the first thing is like, to give a little bit more context to Under Armour, Kevin had stepped into a different role and brought in a new CEO, and she was starting to make some turnarounds happen and had a really big vision for where to take the brand. And then he came in and gave her the boot and took over.
Yeah.
And so like the real question mark is like, did any of her plans survive, and why did he see the need to come back in? Is it an ego thing?
Yeah.
Did he disagree with where she was trying to take the brand? What is the real answer to that question? My thing when it comes to like coming back in as the CEO, it's like, well, if you've got all these great ideas, where were they the first time around, you know?
Yeah.
And if you have the answer, then why didn't you put that in play before you left the brand? I know that they just actually hired some new talent to jump in on the executive team.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see what kind of impacts they're able to make. But not to say I don't have confidence in Kevin and the team, but you've had this opportunity before, and someone else was actually starting to make some progress, and then you went back to like the old playbook, which, if we're just looking at data, like stopped working.
Yeah.
And so I'm just kind of scratching my head a little bit. I mean, the most recent examples we have, where were they during the Olympics? I mean, Steph Curry had a moment during the Olympics.
Yeah.
Where was Under Armour?
Yeah.
If there's any time of the year that Under Armour should be just smashing, that's a good one to pick, to center activation around. And maybe they did do some stuff, but I feel like this has sort of been a big thing, like around the NCAA finals and around the Olympics. They weren't as on it as they could have been,
Yeah.
And so we'll keep an eye on this, but I don't have the most confidence.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's actually, I think it's interesting for him to come back. And I totally agree with you on doing things differently. But I also, it seems like a brand that needs to go back to its roots to me, of team sports and trying to sort of resonate with them. And that's where they were built. And like, he was very much part of that. Yeah. And then they did lose their way in terms of inventory. And I didn't touch on this, but they also expanded into a lot of different sports, which kind of distracted them from their core. Yeah. But he was the person who sort of led that. And so I'm kind of interested if he can go back to that. And the hard part, though, is being patient. Because if you're rebuilding back to what you were, it's kind of like taking 2 steps back in order to move forward. Mm-hmm. It's, can you be patient it's also a publicly traded company, and can investors be patient in really resonating? I take it back to the outdoor and brands. If you think of Patagonia, did that pretty successfully when they were growing rapidly. They were sort of present everywhere, and then they said, "Hold on, this is not what we want. We're going to pull back everything. We're going to sort of shrink a little bit in order to be a better brand." Mm-hmm. And I think they just did that very well. And then sort of similar story, North Face, I think, is in the middle of that process at the moment, where they've had this resurgence with 90s. There's a sort of a re-love of the brand, but are they able to control the need to sell a ton of product and stay down the road that they've been going on, and constrain that and sort of focus on the performance and bring them back to the iconic brand that they were? And so those are 2 outdoor sort of scenarios that are interesting case studies in the past, right, to learn from for potentially Under Armour.
I think it's this idea too of, to be successful, you have to be first, best, or different.
Yeah, I love that.
And I don't know where Kevin Plank takes, they were first when they really went after the collegiate market and really nailed getting the right colors that matched your team uniforms. Like, that was cool, but now everybody can do that.
Yeah.
And different hunting, great. Like, own that, whatever. What's your next hunting? Maybe there is something that actually is going to work.
Yeah.
I remember having some athletes that I managed were on Under Armour for mountain biking and for snowboarding.
Yeah.
But there was never really like a meaningful, like, yes, we are in. It was more like, yeah, here's some stuff. We're trying it out. We're testing it.
Yeah.
They've kind of dipped their toe in the water, but not fully committed to being like, you know what? We're really going in on this. Like, even trail running, they had a trail running shoe, but like they didn't go all the way in, And I think that for Under Armour to actually succeed, they have to just like put their stake in the ground and just own it, as opposed to being like, we'll just try this shotgun approach again. And, one of these things will go and we know we can do this. I think they have to really lean into that differentiated part to be successful if they're going to make it.
That leads me to another question I was thinking about too while reading it is, what do you think about the idea of, can you be a brand without a large number of iconic products, and or do you need those products in order to be the brand? And I bring that up because Under Armour, there aren't a lot of products that I can name that are iconic like other brands have, but they did a good job building their brand essence of who they are. And can you have one without the other? Or do you need the product to do that?
Yeah, I think you even put something in here about how at their investor meeting, they're like, we haven't even made our signature product yet. Yeah. And people are like, that's not a good thing.
No.
I mean, I think actually, if I scroll back to 1996 or whatever,
yeah.
I mean, the idea of Under Armour was this base layer concept, which they did own. And the fact that it was in the color, that sort of was their signature product. And if you think about that, the idea that they've switched to like outer and footwear actually doesn't necessarily match that essence, right? Like it was supposed to be like supporting stuff that was going to be a part of your stuff.
You go back to that time and spandex doesn't sound or tight, it doesn't sound innovative at the time. But at the time, no men were wearing like anything tight or spandex. Right. And they got men to wear spandex. Like it was amazing. Like that's a huge shift that they created in culture to do that. But yeah, I agree. To your point, they don't really, there isn't that something, that product to hang your hat on that they kind of own. Other than Curry, I think the Curry's an interesting one. But beyond that.
Yeah, could you double down on that a little bit and really build out more of a 360 around Steph Curry? He's such an interesting person. And is there more, kind of meat on the bone to really make something more meaningful than just a basketball kit? Could you do off-court stuff with Steph Curry and really lean into that side of things?
Yeah.
That could be interesting.
Yeah.
And again, it's about this idea of like putting your stake in the ground, like this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
We're going to have on-court and off-court, and this is what that's going to look like. And we're going to work with Steph and designers and do some really interesting high fashion stuff or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Make
this more of an aspirational brand, or at least be able to say, Under Armour means this, and that's what it is. Because right now, when I think of it, I think about like the outlet store or the kids' football gear or whatever. I'm not thinking like Steph Curry isn't the first thing I think about at this point. But I want.
I think the when you say that, it also brings up the idea that athleisure is such a big market at the moment, and it's such a market that everybody's chasing into, but it's really hard to define a space within that because it ends up sort of narrowing down to some form of comfort in some way where, I don't know, maybe I reflect back that maybe that's where Under Armour could actually really do well, is like maybe you ignore the athleisure for a while and you go just performance and focus on an innovation in that performance side, because that is something tangible that you can own where comfort gets a little bit more challenging, or style is even more challenging than that, because that's just personal preference.
I forget if you sent this to me or if I just saw it on LinkedIn or something. Someone was talking about this idea of outdoor gear / athleisure apparel and how, we're so focused on differentiating between those two things. Yeah. But 99% of the people that are outdoor, like outdoor now isn't necessarily a carved out thing that you're like, I'm doing outdoor, I'm doing activity. Yeah. It's just part of everybody's lifestyle now of like, I'm
Gorp core, huge.
I'm doing trail, I'm going out on the trail, but it's not differentiated from like the workout I did this morning.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are doing outdoor related activities, but they're not wearing outdoor brands. They're wearing Lululemon, they're wearing Under Armour, they're wearing this other stuff. It's not like you have like, here's my outdoor kit, here's my gym kit. Yeah. It's the same kit. And does it do any good to differentiate between the two, or is it just one giant category and we're putting ourselves in the bucket and limiting our success?
Yeah, it's been fun to watch the outdoor brands as they move along, because it does feel, when you take most of the outdoor brands, they're going to show like a male consumer at like the top of a mountain, or they're grinding something out, and it's about that pinnacle expression. Or you're seeing a lot of people in the city. Like if you look at Arc'teryx's collection, that's largely focused on city. There's that portion, but there isn't the in between, right? Like there isn't the everyday. I always thought that was honestly North Face's greatest opportunity, where their tagline is never stop exploring. And to me, that is that middle, right? Like it doesn't have to be about the peak. It can be about, and I think Jimmy Chin is perfect for this. It's about the creative aspect of being an athlete. And whether you're shooting photography or videography, or you're just out exploring, like it has that in-between zone that you're sort of talking about that is a great opportunity for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's good. Okay, what else do we have on our list of stuff to riff on? This is fun, man. I'm digging this.
Do you want to go? Do you want to talk about how amazing Maris was?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, she was great. Like, if everybody hasn't listened, like that was a great episode to talk about Aura and her experience there. And I loved her passion for she had a personal mission about being in the industry, and it reflected in everything she did. I love that about the episode.
One of my friends texted me and was like, I listened to the Maris episode and I feel like I'm not doing anything with my life. And this is somebody who I consider to be extremely successful. So
I think Maris would love that. She would love hearing that.
I mean, when she came into Aura, I was there and I was immediately struck by that. Like, she knows exactly what she's doing, and her vision for where this needs to go is stuff that I never even considered. And thank goodness there's somebody that's really just living and breathing this kind of stuff. Here's a fun fact, actually. That was the second time we did the podcast. The first time the audio was kind of messed up. And so I was really worried that I was going to lose the essence of that first one, but she crushed it the second time through. One of the things that she said that I thought was really interesting, because she's really serious about activity and providing something that's going to bring value to people and not messing up people in the process. And she kind of made it obvious to me that you can make activity software, but that could actually push someone down the wrong path if you don't do it right.
That's a good point.
People looking at calories and being like, oh man, I'm, whatever.
Optimizing for calories rather than
they
health.
could go down this rabbit hole where they have an eating disorder or something. And so she said this thing on the first version of the pod. She said, if you build the first airplane, you also just invented the plane crash. And so, and that was in reference of you can create whatever feature you want, but also you have to be aware of what if this doesn't work? What if this goes the other way? And are you conscious of protecting that downside? I thought that was such a fascinating take on everything, because we're always so forward focused into we got to do this. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do this thing next. But you're not necessarily looking around to make sure that maybe this is the right thing, or what could go wrong even if we accomplish our goal.
I love that, because it allows you to build in those safety guards as you build it, and not learn later and then build in safety guards. How do you direct it in the right place to begin? I love that they're thinking about it that way.
I mean, millions of people make decisions based off of that data. Of hey, I slept poorly, I'm going to do this, or I slept great, I'm going to do this, or my heart rate's high or low, or there's so many different things that you can kind of dig into, and you have to be thinking about it that much. And I asked her, I'm like, what's it like when you make a decision and it affects 2.5 million people? And she's like, okay, maybe don't put it out like that.
Okay, I didn't really think about that.
But it does. I mean, not everybody's experience is the same. And she had so much insight to share about even exercise as a privilege, the ability for someone to go out and do an hour-long run. Well, if you've got kids, you have to have somebody to take care of those kids. You have to also not just the hour-long run, but prepping for the run and then getting cleaned up after the run. It's not as simple as you'd believe. And so how do you make it more accessible to more people? And like you were saying, get people from walking to running, how do you get them to the next step? And how do you make it easy for that first domino to fall? Because that could end up putting them in a really great place over the long term. If you don't do it right, then what happens?
Exactly. I think that was kind of one of my thoughts in all of it is, I feel like the idea of tracking your measurement or tracking your health is huge, and everybody's doing it. I don't know if you saw the Phoenix 8 just launched. Apple's got their new watch that's launching with new features. There's a ton that's out there, but we talk about precipices or change or liminal moments. I think they are also at a liminal moment where all these brands are sitting on a ton of consumer data. And it's not just one person's data, it is a lot of people's data. Yeah. And with the advent of AI coming in and potentially the plane, right. You could leverage AI in order to be your trainer. And so let's say you have a marathon in 12 weeks. Potentially gone are the days where you would go to Runner's World and find your 12-week training program, and every Sunday is your long run. Yeah. Now, each of these brands could go into their database and use the AI and say, let's find similar people to you and say, all right, we're not going to give you a day-by-day plan. We're just going to give you tomorrow's plan, right? Based on how your current health is, what your HRV is, how much you've slept. Because we've seen all of these other people and we found that this works the best. And so I think this is a really interesting time to see how they can bring that in. And I don't think that's going to take away, for everybody who's a trainer out there, like I don't think it's going to take away your business. Right. Because I think a lot of the benefits of the trainers, everybody, if you're out there, they're largely a social emotional support as well. And I think that is going to be even more important in this sort of digital age. And so it's going to be interesting to see the next few years, how that all changes everything.
The AI that I want to see come together, because I think actually the Oura Ring, and then it pairs, of course, with your Apple Watch or whatever else. Yeah. So you can get quite a bit of information all in one place and make decisions based off that. And they just released like an AI coach to like help you understand stuff even better. But I think, Galaxy Brain, the AI that should exist is not only collecting your health data of like how much you're exercising, what you're eating, et cetera, but it should also combine your schedule. Like take your iCal and plug that into and say like, hey, Steve, you got like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
How about now? Like,
can you do some sit-ups?
Yeah, like go for a little walk or whatever.
Drop and give me 10.
Right. I used to do that in the early days of the pandemic. I was doing 10 burpees for every Zoom call.
Oh, yeah.
And I did like 500 plus in a week. And I was like, okay, maybe. but like, how can AI actually like not just give you, what to do, but when to do, and how else might it do that of just connecting the whole world, this whole like Internet of Things, like how can it just pull it all together of like, okay, your goal is to be this fit or to have this thing or run this race or whatever. Yeah. Here is what it would actually take from all of the elements of your life, instead of like, okay, I'm tracking my Oura stuff to know how I'm sleeping. I've got MyFitnessPal to track my macros. I've got, Peloton doing this, like just smash it all together and tell me what to do. Yeah. And give me the recipe that I'm supposed to eat for dinner and give me the, when during the day am I supposed to do it to optimize it. I mean, that is the AI that needs to exist. Like I don't need AI to tell me, how much weight to lift or how many miles to run. Like put it all together and tell me when. Yeah. That's like what we need next.
Yeah, reduce the decision fatigue, right? Yeah. Like you don't have to make that decision. You just have to go execute. Yeah. Which some people may find boring, but will be really helpful. Like I would love that. I would make my life a lot better.
Tell me what to do.
Yeah. Can you prioritize my life?
That's meaningful. And I feel like people would lock into something like that more than just, the ability to track another piece of data.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, we got through Oura, Under Armour. We talked about Nike.
Do you want to keep going? How much time do we have?
There's a lot here. Let's do one more, and then we'll dig into our BPCs.
Okay.
What do you want to end on for today?
So I think kind of tied to BPC, but I saw this interesting thing by Retro Ralph this week, where he was doing this little, and this was on Instagram, and it was a reel. This idea that running brands have gone too far. Okay, and we'll link it up. But the idea that these brands are pushing sort of an aesthetic and performance almost too far, and it's creating a barrier from people from walking to starting running. Just to go back to the earlier conversation, and that it's too much, and it's too much for handle, etc. And I wanted to get your take. I have a take on it, but I wanted to know what you thought. Do you think like these running brands are too extreme and is making it inaccessible for people, or is it helpful?
It's interesting because I think a lot of people want to have some sort of uniform that they belong to something or that represents them. One of the things that I really loved was the Bandit Running unsponsored project where it was like an all black kit. And I think they could have gone way farther down that road to like own that moment, but also own every other person who has that feeling of like, I'm unsponsored, I love running, I need something to wear. That's the thing I'll wear instead of running a Nike kit or an Adidas kit or whatever. And so I think like having a sort of uniform that shows your commitment or your belonging to something is important. But also, like we were talking about earlier, this idea that, oh, there's outdoor brands, there's athleisure brands, but actually people just wear whatever they want.
Yeah.
I think, there's going to be a handful of brands that all kind of look sort of the same. This is sort of like in cycling. There's a brand called Rafa, which is this really sleek design. It's really, kind of pale colors, and it's just like it has a look.
Yeah.
But then everyone is trying to make the Rafa of X sport. And at a certain point, it just like you're not first, best, or different. And so then everything looks the exact same, and that's boring. I love the anti-brand, and I think the Bandit thing, why that resonated so much with me was like, they zigged when everyone else zagged.
Yeah.
And so, at my core, I'm like, I don't love the idea of everybody trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
That's pretty much where I land on it.
Yeah. It's I had such a visceral reaction to it because I love it. I love the idea that because it reminds me of run clubs, that there are all these different places that people have access points to, and to your point, the uniform creates a culture, and having different uniforms allows that accessibility to the sport. And I think running's always done so well when it's been a little bit of counterculture, a little bit in the face of everything else, because gone are the days of a single runner running down a road. That's not necessarily appealing to anybody anymore. And to have these idea of run crews or to be part of it, I love that. I think the hard part is if some of these brands sort of take it to this idea of innovation, and it's not innovation, it's really just style, then it kind of it loses or makes it inauthentic. But I don't know. I loved it. And to me, I still love the running crews and that essence of it.
I mean, everybody wants to, belong or signal with their clothing, with their shoes. I mean, that's exactly what we were talking about with all the resale stuff, right? You want to signal that you're in the trend, or that you know what's going on, or that you belong to this club, for example.
Yeah.
And maybe this is just my style showing, but when I was living in San Francisco, I was part of the Hash House Harriers.
Oh yeah.
Have you heard of these guys? Yeah. So like that is the anti-brand for running clubs, right? And as far as I'm concerned, like, run what you brung, wear whatever, and then they'll have like weird ones like everybody runs around in like a pink tutu, or there was the Tour de Franzia where you put bike gear on, and do you know about this one?
No.
Oh boy. Okay,
Tell me.
So usually when you do the Hash House Harriers, you run and you find these drops of flour that direct you where you're going. Well, the Tour de Franzia is like pretty aggressive. Instead of drops of flour, there's a box of Franzia, like the boxed wine, and you can't continue running until that box is gone. I've only done that one time.
One was enough. Huh?
That was enough. But like it's so counter to everything else, and it's not about where like if you had a uniform, you'd probably be kicked out, or whatever, and so. But being a Hash House Harrier and you get like a nickname and everything when you're in it, that is a different sense of belonging. But it still is this feeling of like, I'm in this group. This is my crew. This is how I identify as a runner. I'm a hasher, you know? And so I think everybody is, that joins these groups is looking for a way to signal their engagement or their kind of like, I'm in, and so having a certain look and feel to it, I think it makes sense to me why that would exist.
Yeah. Can I go back to something that you said too? People wear what they want to wear. I think that's such an interesting observation because to me, it feels like a lot of these brands that are out there continually push innovation, especially on the apparel side. And it was working really well for a long period of time. And Under Armour is being a great example of that. But it's interesting because it feels like they all may have gone too far where, the consumers may not care that much about the innovation at the end of the day. They just love running in a soft cotton t-shirt.
Yeah.
And it doesn't wick. It's terrible, right? But that's what's comfortable. And so a lot of the messaging that's coming from these brands is actually sort of disconnected from what the consumer want and need is.
Yeah.
And so I think that potentially is what's created a lot of these brands coming in, like Lulu and Viore, et cetera.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
It's fun.
All right, VPC, since this is your first appearance in the pod, you get to go first.
All right, great. So I had a couple, but I read yesterday that Solo brand, so they make Solo stoves.
Okay.
They are coming out with a new ad that's featuring Snoop Dogg and Warren G. And I don't know if you remember last year, Solo brand came out with an ad that was about smokeless, and Snoop was the representative. It created this sort of viral moment where everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, Snoop is going to stop smoking," and it was a really interesting ad. And so I thought it was great to watch. But the challenge is for the brand, it created a lot of awareness, but it didn't translate into sales.
Yeah.
And then it ended up, the CEO ended up leaving, and it was kind of a big deal for the brand.
Yeah.
So I was really surprised to see them come back with Snoop and bring in Warren G. And
maybe he'll regulate.
Yeah. Well, it's about being blunt. and so they're taking a second crack at it to see if they can actually, create awareness and drive sales. So real full funnel idea. And so it's a fun one to see in the marketplace because it is going to give us a little bit of that A/B test to see if one's different than the other or not. And so it was fun to see and kind of geek out on.
I mean, Snoop Dogg's got some momentum right now.
He really
after
does.
The Olympics too.
He's come back.
That's a really interesting thing where the outdoor industry doesn't partner with a lot of mainstream people very often. It's rare, even though a lot of people in, the mainstream are actually doing outdoor activities and could be good partners. The Jeremy Renner Brooks project I thought was really, really well executed.
Yeah.
And I hope that led to just like a mountain of sales for them.
Yeah.
I would love to see more of that stuff happen. But again, like you have to balance out. I'm sure I don't know how the Jeremy Renner deal came together, but like, to get Snoop Dogg to be involved in that's like probably a multi-million-dollar deal, right?
Yeah.
And what outdoor company is going to really risk it on something like that if they don't have a proper go-to-market plan built off of that?
Yeah.
But at the same time, if it's executed correctly, it can absolutely smash. It's just a really, really big investment. And when you can get top athletes for like 0.01% of that, is it worth it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
What I love about the ad is they literally go right at that, where they look at Snoop, or Snoop is on the screen and he says, or I can't remember who says it, but they're like, and why are you here? And he's like, I'm here, sell Solo stove, right? Like or some line along that. But the idea is there isn't that authentic connection across. But they go straight at it with the idea of being blunt.
Yeah.
And it kind of works. It's kind of a different way to look at it. And I liked it. I thought it was fun to see that.
I want to go back to your history at Nike, because they obviously work with a lot of cultural icons, but they also work with a lot of top athletes. And in cases like LeBron James, he's sort of both. But how do you think about that in the context of where to put resources, who to bring in, how to bring in, what's the ratio of people to bring in? Like, what was the mindset at a big brand like that of like, who should we work with and why?
Yeah. And I wasn't privy to all of the conversations that are there, but generally, what's been fascinating to see over time is sort of back when I started, athletes were important, but really it's brands that spoke to people through advertisements, et cetera. And as social media started, then athletes became brands. And so with the advent of that, a lot of the conversations are, what does everybody bring to the table and how is everybody helping each other? And from a very tactical sort of perspective, and what we would look at, what I would see in things like research is, all right, what would something like Serena be known for and what are we known for? And how is that pushing our edge into certain locations? And you can either do that with athletes or with celebrities. And you see On with Zendaya, amazing. Like to try to figure out how they can break into a younger, a women's focused, a more style focused area, and it sort of pushes that boundaries. And so using these athletes and celebrities to expand sort of that authenticity in different locations.
Yeah.
But it's very tactical.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. I love getting like the little inside baseball and that kind of thing. All right. My BPC. So there is a service called ConvertKit, which just rebranded to Kit. They are one of the main services that does newsletters. So if you get a newsletter, you're probably getting it from a service called ConvertKit, Beehive, Klaviyo, or Substack. Those are like the four of the main services that help you write newsletters and send it out. But ConvertKit is really about how to like build brands, how to build, personal brands, and not only the newsletter, but all the other funnels that you would go through, a sales funnel for a course or any other kind of funnel that you would set up. So like this was actually a thing that I learned over the last couple of years is that, when you get an email from a brand, it's a sequence of emails. Like you're like, oh man, these guys keep emailing me. It's like this whole sequence is actually built when you go on their website, they get your email address, and then they send you. They're already planning to send you 12 emails, and each email does a different thing to like get you excited about the product or a new release they have. And then they have like the slow drip of like, after you make it through this sequence, then you're put into this sequence. It's crazy the back end of some of this stuff when you see it, right?
Yeah.
So ConvertKit is one of the main ones. They've been around for a while. They do all kinds of business. And Nathan Barry has a podcast called Billion Dollar Creator, which Dylan and I both absolutely love listening to because he does a lot of sessions with creators where he kind of helps them like, hey, cool, like you got it scaled to this, but here's how you would 10x that, you know? And so he's going tactically with a creator who, sort of looks and feels like the listener and is giving them kind of actionable insights of how they could make their newsletter more profitable or how they could build a personal brand better, more efficiently, whatever. So my BPC, he actually just announced this thing. What's it called? It's like a founder. Gosh, what is it called? Anyway, he basically said, like, we're going to do a thing, 48 hours. We will create your personal brand for you and give you a year's worth of content.
Wow.
And so the deliverables, right? We're basically going to give you some prompts. We're going to not do like a speaking engagement, be like, hey, here's how you be a content creator. It's like we're going to do hands-on workshops with you and your brand. You're going to have some journaling prompts ahead of time so we can get our interviewers teed up. But then we're going to interview you for 60 minutes. We're going to cut all your stuff down into actionable stuff. We're going to give you short form clips. We're going to show you how to post it, how to promote it, how to make sure it shows up in the right places. At the end of the 48 hours together of this like really high intensity thing, you're going to have a website and a newsletter hosted on Kit. You'll have a welcome email sequence, professional headshots, a long-form podcast interview that tells your full story and showcases your expertise, 26 short-form video clips to post on social media, a 2 to 3 minute hiring video cut from the podcast interview, a 3 to 5 minute founding story video also cut from the interview. And if you post one of those videos per week for 26 weeks, that gets you through half a year. And most creators actually do end up reusing content. So that's enough to get you through a year's worth of content in 48 hours.
Wow.
So it's like, I think it's like $10,000. You go to Boise, you pay these guys in 48 hours. They've got you completely stood up with like not just the content strategy, but the actual content itself.
That's amazing.
Isn't that insane?
That's amazing. Because I was talking to a friend yesterday who wants to start her business.
Yeah.
And there's so much information about there of what's my brand name, what's my website, what is my social media strategy, that it's almost paralyzing. Like if you can't figure out one piece, like none of the pieces will all come together. And it sounds like they're solving that for people and like breaking down and it's done and it allows people to move on. That's a great service.
I mean, just to like get your boat pushed out into the water, 26 weeks worth of content in 48 hours is mental. And of course, he has the back end of like all these studios, like cutting all this stuff together, and they have a good process. And also for him, it's smart because, of course, they're going to stay on Kit. They're going to get a big launch on Kit. They're going to have additional content that they'll be able to talk about and show. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of the consulting work I've been doing lately has been a lot of helping people just understand how to create content and how to be set up in a way that you're going to be like guaranteed successful. Because a lot of people just kind of try it and then they give up after a couple weeks. It's like, this is hard. I'm like, yes, it's hard, but if you have a structure, a format, and a process, this is a lot easier. Let me just sit down with you and show you how this is done. And then we do like a 3-hour session that's just like super intense. But at the end of that 3-hour session, you're like good to go. You know exactly what you need to do. And then we do like a monthly check-in afterwards to like make sure you're still on target. And of course, like I got editors and stuff that can jump in, but that's a lot of what I think people are trying to do is like, okay, how do I just kind of like scratch out my corner of the internet here, get my message out, build my brand, my personal brand or my actual brand. And this case here with Nathan Barry and the Kit crew. I mean, it's got to be so intense, but like imagine just like one weekend and you could have all of your stuff
all
set.
Of that. Yeah.
That would be
time for me to go to Boise.
Yeah, that's that. We call that in editing the reign of terror, and that's exactly it. You're just like heads down.
Yeah,
but man, to have all that coming out of it would be insane.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well done. Yeah.
Sweet.
Nice. Well, thanks for having me on. This has been fun.
Yeah, this is super
I'll come
fun.
back anytime.
This was everything I hoped it would be. I hope Dylan is proud of us. I'm sure he will be. No, this is super fun. And to be able to kind of riff on this stuff and have the background and have the detail and all that, this has been really fun to do. So more of this to come.
Yeah.